Shark Media.
I am psyched and feeling good today. Hello, I'm Johnny Mack with your daily comedy news. Why are you so happy, Johnny Mack? If you've been around me lately, you've heard me say things like, I don't want to talk about politics all day. I just want to make fun of, Jim Gaffigan. Well, good news. Jim Gaffigan did a lengthy interview about his bourbon project. On tomorrow's show, I'll lead off with that so I can put my feet up, take it easy, and goof on Jim Gaffigan. That's what I want to do. But today, there's some actual news that we do need to cover. But let's start with late night jokes. Did you see someone's knocking down the East Wing of the White House? Now, hold on. Now, if you're like, John, you just said you don't want to do politics. This isn't politics. This is just silly jokes. Jimmy Fallon said, guys, a lot of people are angry at President Trump because it was just announced he's demolishing the entire East Wing of the White House to build his new ballroom. Yeah, the entire wing is gone. Normally, if you hear that, you're flying Frontier Airlines. See, that's not a political joke. That's a clean joke. Seth Meyers said, this is the first thing aliens do in movies to announce they're evil. They blow up the White House. Trump is just cutting out the middleman of invading aliens. Love it. And if you're a longtime listener, remember during the pandemic, I had to create and rely on the Late Bot? Well, Late Bot is back, baby. Late Bot says the East Wing used to be where the First Lady's office was. Melania is reportedly thrilled. She's finally getting her wish. She doesn't have to be in the White House. Officials say the ballroom will fit 1,000 guests, which is great because that's just enough room for Trump's lawyers. As I'm sitting here recording, just in, Jon Stewart has commented on the ballroom on his weekly show podcast. Jon said, just make Mar-a-Lago the new White House and Palm Beach the new Capitol. That's fiscally responsible. That's somebody looking out for the debt. Speaking of Jon Stewart, Jimmy Kimmel gave an interview and said that ABC should have given 11:30 to Jon Stewart way back when. Kimmel was on Ted Danson's podcast and said ABC wanted a traditional late-night talk show in that slot. John and I have the same manager, James Baby Doll Dixon, and James was about to close this deal for John to host the show. The ABC chairperson watched my tape, and he was like, I think this might be the guy. And he brought the tape to Bob Iger, and Iger said, yeah, this might be the guy. It was a very strange thing because James was in the difficult position of having to tell Jon Stewart, you're not going to ABC, but Jimmy's going to ABC. That was a mistake, by the way. They definitely should hire John. If I'm in that position, there's no question I hired John 100 times out of 100. Kimmel said he was confused over winning the gig. He remembers saying, I was like, why? This is quite a leap you guys made. I was on the Man Show. I was doing football picks on Fox NFL Sunday. And Iger goes, well, you were cheaper. And everybody laughed, but I knew he wasn't kidding. Kimmel recalled the early days of the show were rough. I think my vision of hell is being forced to watch my first year of shows because it's just as painful as anything could get for me. It took us a long time to figure it out, and we're very fortunate to get a long time to figure it out. Somehow we wound up getting good ratings. I still don't know how that was, but they were good enough to keep us on the air, even though I was causing trouble every, 2.5 months. Some major thing was happening. Something came out of my mouth, and caused a whole thing. It was tumultuous. Kimmel was asked about Colbert Gates. Was a little quid pro quo. Make the famous politician go away. Let the merger through. Kimmel said, we don't know for sure. What I do know for sure is that some of the information that's been released by the people who let him go can't possibly be true. There's no way he's losing $40 million a year. There's no way it's even close to that. I know how finances of late-night television shows work, and it's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense at all. So when you hear things that are obviously lies, you have to assume that there are more lies behind it. And that's what I think. John, how you doing not being political today? It's going great, guys. Nikki Glaser, she's got the right agent. Hollywood has decided we're going to put Nikki Glaser in front of everybody. And that is not a backhanded comment about Nikki. They do that with people every so often. The next person you're going to see everywhere is Rachel Sennott. Write that down. We'll come back in 2 months. You'll see what I'm saying. Nikki Glaser is going to star and produce a new film that Judd Apatow will produce for Universal Pictures. It is described as a modern, edgy, romantic comedy. That's all we know about that. Nikki Glaser will host the Golden Globes this year, which brings me to the next story, which has me very upset. Netflix, they made that movie Jay Kelly with George Clooney and Adam Sandler, the great dramatic actor Adam Sandler. Yeah, they're putting it in the comedy categories for the Golden Globes. Now, why does this bother you, Johnny Mack? Because everyone is saying Adam Sandler, the great dramatic actor, is fantastic in it, and why wouldn't he be? He's a great dramatic actor. Now, if you nominate this as a comedy and he wins, he's going to think he's a good comedian, which he's not. Guys, put this in as a drama. They're planning on nominating Adam Sandler for Best Supporting Actor. But don't call this thing a comedy. What are you doing? It upsets my whole plan. I thought I had this figured out, that we were going to convince Adam Sandler, you know what? Rest of your life, you do drama. Jay Kelly in theaters November 14th. It'll be on Netflix December 5th. The Golden Globe nominations are out December 8th. In the Chicago Tribune, Christopher Borelli writes, "We are currently entering a new Sandler season. One of those brief occasional windows of time where we are reminded that, hey, you know what? Life's too short. Everyone likes Adam Sandler these days. He makes some bad movies, yes, and he makes some smart movies. We might even root for him to win an Oscar for Jay Kelly. That's right, we would. Would he wear a hoodie and joggers to the Academy Awards? We would hope so." Let's see, what am I wearing right now on the Sandler thing? I've got a pretty nice looking gray sweat zip jacket. That's pretty good, but I am wearing my traditional podcasting gray sweatpants. So if I jump on a Zoom call, you'll think I'm dressed nicely, but then waist down, I'm all Sandler today. Borelli talks about walking into the United Center to see Sandler's stand-up tour, and he writes, "As I waited across the street, I listened to a pair of traffic cops get into a confusing but somehow relatable argument about what's actually endearing about Adam Sandler. One cop said, 'He's a good actor.' The other cop said, 'I think all these people are here because he's funny.' Yeah, Adam Sandler, the comedian. 'Well, he's a good actor, but I don't know what's funny about him.' Am I a cop in Chicago? Is this like an HBO series where I'm leading a dual life and like in the daytime I'm a podcaster in the basement and at night I'm a traffic cop in Chicago? Because that sounds like this guy overheard a conversation with me. And by the way, this is what I want the show to be. I don't want to talk about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. This is more fun. This piece writes, Sandler's new shows are titled You're My Best Friend. And as awkward as that sounds, it's a pretty spot-on way of describing a show so driven by the audience's warmth and goodwill it transcends what we typically expect of a performer. To put it bluntly, Sandler is not a particularly funny stand-up, and he has never been. Thank you, Christopher Borelli. Oh my God, I might have to reach out to this guy and have this guy on. Where was I? He was telling us, to put it bluntly, Sandler's not a particularly funny stand-up, and he has never been. Yeah, you can't say that enough. I know I repeated it. He paces and arrives at jokes that sound half-remembered and talks in a speedy mumble. I would say about half the people seated around me never laughed out loud once. You preach, Christopher Borelli, preach! But they were smiling. Sandler has almost nothing new to say about the topics he's been talking about at 59, growing old, surviving teenage daughters, stumbling through married sex, and somehow it still kind of works. The New York Times did a big profile of Stavros Halkias. The premise, Stavros Halkias wants a career. Will his fans let him have one? This thing is really long. The person who wrote it really knows Stavros' career. They wrote, if you think you recognize Halkias, you probably do. At 5'7" and 300 pounds, he has a 95th percentile body type that he does not try to hide. His wardrobe centers on loudly patterned shirts and European tracksuits. All right, so far today, I'm definitely dressed better than Stavros. And I'm probably tied with Sandler unless we're on a Zoom, in which case I'm in first place because of my nice gray zip hoodie. I digress. They talk about Stavros' laugh, which people often accuse him of faking, but which bursts forth so often that if it was ever an affectation, it seems to have become natural long ago. A high percentage of the people who approached him in Madison turned around after hearing this laugh. Then the next section is a long recap of his career. Stavros says, I don't really like being famous. I don't really like seeing people like stopping me on the street. He said he might have to adopt a more discreet look. The question of Halkias' performance on Tires, and he's really good in that. That's a great show. You know, I think I haven't watched like the last 4. I got distracted. Thank you, New York Times, for reminding me. I have to go back and watch that. On Tires is any indication, he's not disappearing into his roles. Like many comedians who transition to acting, he seems to have been hired to play himself on a TV show. A thrill for fans who previously knew him as himself on a podcast or himself on a stage. Every comedian is to some degree trapped by what their audience has come to expect. Ask Jim Carrey. But the podcast comedian who is invited into listeners' homes, cars, and ear canals for multiple hours each week is especially likely to evoke a sensation of familiarity in thousands of people he has not met. These people may not want their imaginary friend to change. Good stuff. Leslie Jones, her new special is out today on Peacock. It is called Leslie Jones Life Part 2. Leslie Jones tackles aging, relationships, fame, and life's unexpected twist with the kind of honesty and fire only Leslie Jones can bring.
Comedy stock market.
Thank you, Burt Reynolds. Every Friday, we take a look at some comedians and We talk about buying proverbial stock in their careers. We try and sell high. We try and buy low. To the point, I'm tempted to buy some of the comedians who appeared at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, but on principle, I will not. All right, some recommendations this week. Let's buy Stavros Halkias. I mean, you got to see the length of this profile in the New York Times. This is a major, major thing. And that doesn't just happen, which makes me think, as I said earlier in the show, Hollywood decides somebody's going to have a moment. Nikki Glaser, Rachel Sennott, somebody's pushing Stavros, so let's keep an eye on that. I bet we see a lot of Stavros press now. We'll buy Stavros Halkias before his stock is expensive. Let's sell Joe Rogan. Not that the Joe Rogan articles have been pretty positive this year, but they're increasingly negative, and Joe is getting increasingly dragged into the political rabbit hole, and I don't think that's a place he wants to stay. Let's sell our Joe Rogan stock, and let's start to accumulate some more Sandler. The buzz on this Jay Kelly thing is really good, and he is, of course, a great dramatic actor. Why would you not want to support that? Let's buy some Adam Sandler. That's your comedy stock market for this week. Out today, an audio album. I always like that. It's Luke Hagee's Have That. Also out today on audio, Mal Hall's What Are We Doing Today? Becky Robinson will self-release her debut stand-up special. It is called Becky Robinson Entitled. It'll be on her website today. In this hour, Becky Robinson dives into the chaos of coming out as a lesbian during the pandemic, the pitfalls of being way too friendly as an adult, and her unapologetic love for Taco Bell. But the night wouldn't be complete without an appearance from her character, the entitled housewife. There's not just a special. Becky Robinson will release a 30-minute documentary offering a behind-the-scenes look at its creation. From the Japanese Times, your home for comedy news, the headline, a Japanese comedian walks into an Australian bar and stays there. Takashi Wakasugi stopped by the Tokyo Comedy Bar in the Shibuya ward. Waka had just gotten back from Edinburgh performing his show Comedy Samurai. He opened his set at the Tokyo Comedy Bar saying, "I live in Australia, so that's why my English is a little crikey." This was Waka's first time back in Japan since moving to Australia in 2018. He says toilets are always a reliable bet for laughs. I also like to make fun of Aussie people from a Japanese viewpoint, and they love that. They love Japan. He said Australian audiences know a lot about Japan. Edinburgh was more of a challenge. I told them Japanese people make things better. Toilets, we fix that. Whiskey, we fix that for you. They hated that joke. He says his writing approach is planting a seed and digging for oil. Both take time, but they'll pay off if you're patient. He says, I love doing 4 minutes, one joke. Adding the longer approach works better with live crowds than on the internet. Yes. He'll do language jokes. In one bit, a misheard word sends him spiraling into a series of imagined meanings. For example, the slang term YOLO, for you only live once, he spun that into a joke about Buddhism's belief in multiple lives. That sounds like a great premise. What he loves about Western stand-up is how personal it is, unlike in Japan, where comedians often play exaggerated characters. Takashi Wakasugi. And that is your comedy news for today. Fun show. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll talk about Jim Gaffigan's bourbon. Can't wait.